Hello and welcome to Heal Yourself Therapies. I am thrilled to be here with David Icke, the godfather of the truth movement, really. And we're here to kind of talk about the status quo and talk about spirituality and talk about awakening and what do we do once we've awakened. So we're going to pick David's brains. So thank you very much for joining us, David. I appreciate your time's premium at the moment.
Real pleasure, and I do everything I can whenever I can, because this is a critical time where we are literally deciding where the world goes. So it's a global situation we're facing now. I mean, we've seen through human history, there's been a tyranny here and a tyranny there and a tyranny here. But what we're looking at now is global tyranny. So we're all in this together. It doesn't matter if you're called Spanish or Italian or American or British or Australian or South African, it doesn't matter. We're all in the gun sights of this, and we all hold the key to bringing an end to it. Sure,
yeah. Well, if you don't mind, I'm going to take you back a little bit and then just ask you this question. I've watched you since the beginning. I've watched the stories that you've told about how this all started, but you tell a story about how you were initially contacted and how you received downloads of information. Yeah. The question I've got is, does that still happen to you, David? And if it does, how does that happen?
Well, yes, it does. It's happened for 30 years. What happens eventually is you become so integrated into it. It becomes so much a part of you that you and it are actually one unit. You are the same. I sit here writing and researching, and when I do, there's an electromagnetic field that I'm sitting in that I can feel, and I get insights into things. And when I started out in 1990 consciously, I mean, my whole life's been leading in that direction as I look back, but from 1990, when I consciously became aware of all this, I would come across information and come to conclusions on that information of what's going on. And then after a very few years, from maybe 93, 94, I would instinctively know what was going on, and then the information would follow to support it, the names, dates, places, type information to support the instinct. Mm-hmm. And it was a reverse. And so that's how I've worked ever since. And of course, my life's been a synchronistic series of daily coincidences where information, people, personal experiences come into my life that are basically like handing me pieces in a puzzle to put the jigsaw puzzle together. And the thing is, the more pieces you put into the picture, the quicker and easier the later pieces are, because you can see what actually you're looking at and how it works. So yeah, it continues to this day.
Okay, excellent. Something you said reminded me of the thing that you say often, which is connecting the dots. And I noticed that lots and lots of truthers use that same expression now. You kind of coined it, connecting the dots, and everybody uses it. Okay, so how do you maintain, David? We're in difficult times, and especially, I don't think anybody has been attacked the way that you've been attacked over the years for saying what you say. How do you maintain your spiritual health through all of that?
Self-identity. It's really is pretty much that simple. I changed my self-identity very early on in this whole sequence of events over the last 30 years. And when I say that, I mean I realize that all the labels that we give ourselves and we're given man, woman, black, white, this race, this religion, that religion, this sexuality, that sexuality, names, life stories. They're actually not the I, they are experiences which the I is having. Mm-hmm. And so I cease to identify the I, the infinite I, with the labels, and identified that with the consciousness that was having those experiences called labels. And what happens then is you become, at that level, an observer to an extent, an observer of events. And because you're becoming an observer, while you are on one level experiencing the events, and the experience takes you here, but the observer part of you takes you here. And this is where the connecting the dots comes in, because from this point of view, you can see how the dots connect. You can see the pictures, you can see the patterns, whereas here you're only seeing the dots and everything seems random. But here you can see how it all fits together. And from this point of the observer, you know that you are a point of attention, an expression of an infinite flow of consciousness, of which we are all expressions. And therefore, what people throw at you in ridicule or abuse, and what they throw at your label, becomes something that doesn't hit you emotionally as it would if you were stuck in this level and everything was I'm human and I'm my labels and they're saying terrible things about me. Mm-hmm. From the level of the observer, you're watching the river from source to sea. Here you're seeing the next turn on the river and everything looks very different. So from the observer point of view, people hurling abuse and ridicule at me is just an experience. And it's not something to get pulled into, because if you do, then your emotional state and your desire, to, how can you say that about me? No, you get pulled in. Whereas from this point of view, okay, you're saying that, well, that's interesting. Thanks for sharing that with me. Now, what else have I got to do today? It's not the same experience. And I've experienced both. I experienced in the early 1990s historic levels of ridicule in the early days from this point of view. Right. And I experienced it in a way that was very painful and bewildering. And, it was like that old song, I'm just a soul who's been misunderstood. Oh, Lord, don't let, whose intentions are good. Oh, Lord, don't let me be misunderstood. The Animals, I think it was. Yeah. But when you start to self-identify the I with consciousness, that which is on an eternal journey of exploring forever, it's not the same experience. It really doesn't matter what people say about you from that level, because it's just they'll think something else tomorrow. In fact, lots of people that stop me in the street wanting to talk about the information, I know they were ridiculing me years and years ago. So they will think something else tomorrow. And the point is that if we get intimidated into not speaking our truth because we fear what people will say today, then what it means is that what we know or what we think or how we see things never gets communicated. And if I'd have done that years ago when we had this historic level of ridicule, and I'd have run away and said, I'm not staying anymore, I'm not going out in the public eye because look what they're saying about me, then what has occurred now with people saying, well, this guy said this decades ago and it's happening, would never be the case because I never have said it. Good. So it's so important today more than ever before to speak your truth. And if people around you don't respect your right to your view, your opinion, your way of seeing reality in the world, then question, what are you doing around them?
Yeah.
You know, there's lots of people out there now who are awakening to seeing the world in a very different way. Go and find some of them and interact with them. Because if you know, people say to me, oh, my friends say this and say that about me and what I'm saying. Well, first of all, they're not your friends then. Because a friend in the true sense respects your right to have your opinion, whatever it is. Yeah. They don't seek to impose their opinion on you. And that's the point. If you are intimidated into silence and staying silent about things that you think should be heard, then what you're doing is allowing the loudest, most intimidating people and voices to impose their narrative on the world. And that's what these psychopaths do, that I call the global cult, that's behind this pandemic hoax. These are the people that are using their created companies, not just controlled now, created companies in Silicon Valley, like Facebook and Google and YouTube and Twitter, to impose the will or to impose the narrative of this cabal by censoring people who have a different view. Mm-hmm. And if we kind of allow that to happen in our lives as well, that we're not going to say what we think about the world because what will people say, then basically at every level of society and every level of our life, the same narrative is the only one that's ever heard. And I know there are vast numbers of people, even in the medical profession, in the science profession, even increasingly in academia, who know this is a crock of crap that's going on at the moment. They know it's a lie, they know it's a hoax and a fake pandemic. But they're still intimidated about speaking out because of the consequences they see for them and their careers. But, you know, in the end, you see, we come back to what I said earlier. When you self-identify with the labels, I am ours, I call them, or phantom self, then you can get pulled into, what about my career? What about people saying this about me? And what are the consequences of this? But from here, it's just an experience. I am all that is, has been, and ever can be, exploring forever, forever. This is just a brief experience within a brief experience called human. And from that point of view, you see it in a totally different way. But from this level of awareness, you will always do what you know to be right. You will always speak your truth. You won't be intimidated. Why? Because you know there's nothing to be intimidated about. But here, you perceive authority and consequences in a completely different way. And it can intimidate you into silence and batter you into submission and acquiescence, where this will never do that. Because it can see it's just a brief experience, and not a something that is that important. You know, if you are a state of infinite awareness, eternally exploring all possibility, then whether some authority says this about you or does this about you, in this tiny little experience called human, within the infinity of forever, that's important. That's something that should silence you and should frighten you. From that point, this level, that doesn't happen. But from this level, of course, it looks very different, and people do get intimidated. And what's going to happen to me if I? Whereas from this level, what you do is you speak your truth, and nothing can stop you speaking your truth. No intimidation, no what ifs, no, what will happen to me if I? You speak your truth. And that has a power, it has an energy, a frequency of its own, which is very, very powerful. And this cabal, this global cult, as I call it, it manipulates through intimidation. It manipulates through fear. It gets its way through fear. I mean, you look at the spring of 2020, it was fear that allowed this, compared with the global population, tiny number of people to get billions of people under house arrest. Mm-hmm. One group, the biggest, were frightened because they bought the lie that this was a deadly pandemic and their lives were in danger. And so they went under house arrest because they thought it would protect them, because that's what they've been told. Then you had another group, smaller but significant, that was really questioning whether this story was true. But they went under house arrest for another fear reason, which was the fear of, well, what if I don't submit to what the authorities tell me to do? What are the consequences for me? Mm-hmm. And so it's fear that is used to intimidate the great majority of the human race to comply with the will and the agenda and the impositions of a tiny number of people. But from this level of awareness where you know the I, the nature of the I, and it's not David Icke, born in Leicester, England in 1952. That's an experience. I'm the consciousness having that experience. From this point of view, you know there's nothing to fear and nothing to be intimidated about. And thus you speak your truth. And then the cabal has a problem with you, because its whole modus operandi is intimidation through fear and getting its way through fear. When they find people that are not intimidated by them and are not in fear of them, they don't know what to do, because they don't know how to handle it, because they're so used to people just handing over control of their lives, doing whatever they are told to do. And when people don't, and more starting to enter this level of awareness where this happens, they don't know what to do with them. And so, the way out of here is not, just protests and such things, although they're important because they are a symbol of public opinion and where people are at. It's actually transforming ourselves from the perception of the I that we're told to believe in, our name, our life story, our sexuality and all the rest of it, and to move the self-identity to what we really are, which is consciousness. And from that level, what seems to be intimidating and fearful in the world that we live in doesn't seem like that at all.
Thank you very much for that reply. That was a bigger reply than I even anticipated. So excellent. Thank you very much.